I've spent years driving some of the most elite people in Sydney, but nothing prepared me for the night I picked up passengers who weren't supposed to exist.
This happened about 5 or 6 years ago here in Sydney. At the time, I was in a very low place in life. I had developed a nerve condition called Bell's palsy. For those who don't know, it's when one side of your face becomes paralyzed and sort of droops down. My smile was crooked, my words were slurred, and to me, my face felt ruined. It wasn't just physical, it destroyed my confidence. I stopped going out, stopped meeting people. My business collapsed because I couldn't bring myself to face clients. I locked myself inside my house, retreating into a shell.
Now, I've got teenage kids, and one evening they came to me and said, "Dad, this isn't you. You need to get out of the house. Try something different, something new." I laughed at first, but their words stuck with me. The very next day, I sat at my computer and started scrolling through job sites. And just for fun, I set filters for jobs completely outside my field, something far away from what I used to do. That's when I saw it, an ad from one of Sydney's top chauffeuring companies. They catered exclusively to the elite, judges, politicians, celebrities. They wanted chauffeurs with a certain kind of mindset, discreet, professional, and polished. I thought, why not me? The worst they could say was no. When I told my kids, their eyes lit up. "Dad, imagine you'll be driving movie stars, models, famous politicians. We'll need to get you suits like Men in Black." They were joking, but they were also trying to lift me up, and honestly, I needed that. So I went for the interview. The manager was warm and professional. He walked me through the whole process. And at the end, he looked at me and said, "Sam, can you start tomorrow?" I froze. "But my face, don't you see it? I can't even speak properly." He tilted his head, almost confused. "What face? You look perfectly normal to me." I can't explain how much those words meant. For the first time in years, I felt like someone looked past my condition. I walked out of that office determined to give this job everything I had. The next day, they handed me the keys to a brand new BMW 5 Series. It would run in shifts, but for that day, it was mine. I threw myself into the work, picking up high-profile clients from airports, conferences, glittering parties. The schedule was tough, but I loved it. Slowly, I noticed my Bell's palsy improving. My face was healing, and so was I. But then came the incident that still chills me to this day. One afternoon, I dropped off a client in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, very expensive homes along the water. Afterward, I switched on my rideshare app to fill some idle time. Almost instantly, I got a ping. But when I looked at the GPS location, I frowned. It wasn't pointing to any house. The marker was sitting out in the water. I thought, this must be a GPS glitch. Still, I drove to the end of the road by the shore and waited. About 10 minutes later, I saw them, 6 figures, walking not from the houses, but from the pier.
There were 3 very old women, a middle-aged man, a woman, and a small child. Immediately, something felt wrong. The 3 old women were unnaturally pale, like they had no blood in them at all. The man was short, but what unsettled me most was his head. It was too small, his features sharp, almost rodent-like, like a mouse. Protocol allowed only 4 passengers. They decided the 3 old women would come with me while the others booked another car. I stepped out, opened the doors for them, and they slid in without a word. As soon as I started driving, one of them leaned forward and said softly, "Sam, could you drive a little slower?" I asked, "Why?" She said, "Our bones ache." Her voice was thin, papery. I forced a polite smile and said, "Of course."
The whole ride, they murmured to each other about a man they seemed to know well. At first, it sounded like admiration. like he was alive, a friend or a relative. But just before we reached their destination, one of the women said calmly, "Well, we don't need to worry about him anymore. He's been dead for a while now." I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck, but I stayed silent, dropped them off, and drove away. The next morning, when I got into my BMW, I froze. There was a weird smell in the car. Thick, sour, unmistakable. If you've ever been near a morgue, you know it instantly. The smell of a dead body. It felt like it clung to the seats, the carpets, in the air.
Our company sent cars daily for professional detailing, but no matter how much they scrubbed, the stench remained. Day after day, it grew worse. One evening, another driver named Nick, who shared shifts with me on the same car, pulled me aside. "Mate," he said, "have you noticed the rides for this BMW are getting fewer every day, and the boss is worried?" Then he whispered, "Have you noticed the smell?"
I nodded slowly. He told me his mother suggested sprinkling holy water inside. When I went home and told my wife what Nick said, my wife added, "Why don't you sprinkle Zamzam water too, just to be sure?" We were desperate, so we did both. We sprayed every corner of that BMW. And the next day, it was gone. Completely gone. The air was clean, fresh, as if nothing had ever happened. The smell never returned, and the business picked up again.
For a while, life went back to normal, until 2 months later. By then, I'd been upgraded to a BMW 7 Series. It was night, around 11 p.m., when I finished dropping off a client back in those same eastern suburbs. On my long drive home, I opened the rideshare app, hoping to get one last booking. When the request came through, my stomach twisted. The GPS marker was at the exact same place as before, out on the water. I should have canceled, but curiosity pulled me back. I parked where the road ended, near the pier. Minutes passed. Then, out of the dark, 2 figures emerged.
A tall man in an old-fashioned European-style suit and hat, broad-shouldered. Beside him, a frail woman in a jacket. Her eyes caught my headlights and gleamed like a cat's. They entered the car silently, and almost immediately, the woman's voice came from the back seat. "Sam, could you drive a little slower?" I asked why, and she said, "Our bones ache." The exact same words as before. I forced myself to glance back politely, and what I saw nearly froze my heart. Her eyes, they weren't normal. They were completely white, with only the tiniest black dot for an iris.
I turned back to the wheel, pretending nothing was wrong. My hands were trembling, but I kept driving until I reached their stop, a grand 3-story mansion. The man stepped out, opened the door for her, and together they vanished inside.
I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I had just seen. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me. In broad daylight, I drove back to that mansion. It was abandoned. The windows boarded, the gates rusted. No one had lived there in years.
When I told my wife, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No more night shifts, ever." And I agreed. Even today, when I drive past those eastern suburbs, I never look toward that pier. Because I know some passengers are not meant to be picked up.